Welcome, everybody. We all set? We good?
Kind of like if you want to go.
I'd like to call to order the March 14th meeting of the Rockville Center Board of Education. Can everybody rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In case of an emergency, the exits are in the back of the room, and then follow the exit signs in the hallway, which will lead you to doors going out. This way is probably quickest to the parking lot. Okay, before we get into student recognition, I'd just like to say something really quick. Today at the high school at 10 o'clock this morning, to me, something very amazing happened. The student body responded to, a memorial, a 17-minute memorial that was called out across the country. But our student body, it was amazing, it was respectful, and just, it was very moving to be here and watch that happen. Coming out to the field, how they spoke and stood for 17 minutes, announcing all the people that died in Parkland, Florida. Very moving. Every parent should be so proud of all their kids, and even the children that the students that opted to stay in, respectful, and no disruption or anything like that. It was just a privilege and an honor to be there with the student body. So I just wanted to make that announcement. I don't know if you want to say something now, Dr. Johnson?
Usually I was going to say it later, but I'll add my voice to that of the board president. I've had so many proud moments in my 31 years as superintendent. This was a really memorable and proud moment today. What I don't think people really understood was that this was their moment. They created this moment in honor of the kids and the teachers who died at Parkland. This was not us, this was them. We honored their right under the Constitution to speak on behalf of their classmates in Parkland, Florida. And at the end of the day, I'm going to start choking up. It was very, very moving. They designed it. They communicated with their classmates. They got it off the ground, and with the 17 minutes, it was one of the most eerie experiences of dead silence, absolutely dead silence, except for those who were speaking on behalf of the children and the teachers who died. It was a remarkable experience, I think one that we should be very proud of, and our students could not have been more respectful. I believe truly that their voices will be heard. This is not the end. I don't believe it for 1 second. The strength of character that they demonstrated in the way in which they conducted themselves and put this thing together is absolutely remarkable. I think the world will be different because of them, and I thank them for their love of their classmates in Parkland, their concern and respect for one another, and the voices that they were able to use today to let the world know that they are going to be heard on this issue, not just today, I suspect in future days as well. So my thanks to you. Some of you are you're right here. Would you like to stand up for one moment? So, okay, John, thank you.
We also the middle school also participated on a smaller scale, but still very respectful, very organized, and just a tribute to the people who passed away or who died in Florida, about approximately a month ago. So thank you to all of the students that participated and made this what you wanted it to be. We'll move on to student recognition. Dr. Johnson?
Yes, Carol could not be here tonight, so we have one of our infamous or famous coaches who is going to come to the microphone tonight, Chris Webster, longtime teacher at Southside High School, and he's going to do the honors in recognizing our athletes here at Southside. Chris?
Carol asked me to speak tonight. I don't know if it's because she trusts me or if she knows I'm a sucker who never says no. I'm going to go with the former. On behalf of Carol Rosetto, who is upstate at an athletic directors conference, it is my pleasure to introduce this next group of student athletes and to honor them for their outstanding achievements during the 2017-18 winter season. Before I begin speaking about individual accomplishments, I'm proud to mention that 100% of Southside High School's winter athletic teams were all recognized by the New York State Public High School Athletics Association as scholar athlete teams. Boys basketball, girls winter track, boys winter track, gymnastics, wrestling, and swimming and diving. Through a tremendous amount of hard work and dedication, both on and off season, all of the athletes that I will be speaking about tonight have individually earned all-county honors or above this season. Unfortunately, many of these athletes were unable to attend due to conflicts with their own county awards ceremonies, but I would like to acknowledge their performances here as well. The gymnastics team had 2 all-county athletes. Peyton Waller and Aaron Agaglia both earned all-county honors as all-around gymnasts this season. Both girls qualified and competed in the state championships this past weekend. Tonight, they are receiving their awards at the Section 8 Athletic County Dinner. The boys swimming and diving team's 200 medley relay finished first in the Division A1A championships, first in the county championships, and third in the state. The team's 200 freestyle relay were the Division A champions, finished 5th in the state, and set a new school record. These 2 relays are a perfect representation of the collaboration which has turned the South Brooks swimming and diving team into a rising program in Nassau County. Sophomore swimmer Ryan Davidoff had another outstanding season, earning all-county honors in the 500 freestyle and as a part of the 200 medley relay and 400 freestyle relay, in addition to earning all-division status in the 100 backstroke. Ryan qualified for the state championships in the 200 free, 500 free, and the 100 backstroke, in addition to all 3 relays. Tonight, they are receiving their awards at the Section 8 Athletic County Dinner. I would like to invite Coach Jerry D'Angelo, Ryan O'Shea, and Matt Trenchney from the boys basketball team up to the podium.
Smile, boys. It's not that bad.
Ryan O'Shea was selected as team captain this season, and his high energy and work ethic earned him all-county honors. He led the team in scoring with an average of 15 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. Matt Trenchney was also selected as team captain and earned all-county honors for his performance this season. Matt averaged 13 points per game, led the team in made 3-pointers, and was always a threat when he had the ball in his hands.
Wait, don't go away.
I get to bother you more, Ryan.
Recognize that name, Mr. O'Shea.
Why are they doing it right there?
Go where you can't see the camera. Good. Just make sure you can't see the camera. Good.
I would like to welcome Gianna Mora, Jenna Lopez, and Coach Dan Farrick to join me from the girls basketball team. Gianna is a 3-year varsity player, 2-year starter, and 2-year captain who averaged 9 rebounds and 9 points per game this year, earning her all-county honors. Her coach stated that Gianna was the hardest working athlete that he has ever coached. Jenna Lopez is a 4-year varsity player, 3-year starter, 2-time captain, and 2-time all-county selection. Her coach stated that Jenna is a pure leader who made everyone around her better.
Oh, God, I mean, I don't know.
Before I speak on behalf of the wrestling team, I would like to invite Coach Mike Robinson and wrestler Kyle Mosier to join me. Mosier. The Southeast Cyclones, which is a combination of Southside and East Rockaway athletes, would like to congratulate junior Kyle Mosier on another outstanding season. Kyle was the Nassau County champion at 145 pounds and placed 5th in the New York State Championships. Kyle has been a state semifinalist for the past 4 seasons and an all-county athlete for the past 5 years since he was in 7th grade. He ended his junior year with 40 wins and only 4 losses and has a career record of 186 wins and 30 losses. Once again, congratulations to 2 times county champion, 4 times All-State and freshman All-American, Kyle Mosier.
It's so funny. She's hilarious.
And finally, for the winter track team, I'd like to invite Coach Chris Webster. I'm sorry. Carly Wolfel and Olivia Rodriguez up to the podium. Captain Carly Wolfel is a name we hear more and more at Southside. After being crowned the county champion in cross country this past fall, leading her team to the state championship, her success in the winter continues. Carly was named all-county in the 3,000-meter run, where she finished 3rd in the county, and all-county in the 1,500-meter run, where she finished 2nd. To make the season even better, she also competed in the state championship for the 1,500-meter run. And to top it all off, she once again broke the school records in both events. Captain Olivia Rodriguez once again showed her skills by winning the high jump, being named county champion in the event, as well as the conference champion in that event. Olivia, a strong contender in the sprinting events and relays, showed her talents all over the track and proved what a great captain she is, but it is in the high jump that she truly excelled. She was named county champion and jumped 5 feet 4 inches. To put that into perspective, Olivia is 5 feet 4 inches and can jump over herself.
I'm only 5 feet tall.
Keeping with her co-captain Carly, Olivia also set a new indoor school record in the high jump. Thank you, everyone.
They're so cute. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us as you Items for information, Dr. Johnson?
Yes, first up is a program that we have really become very proud of at Southside Middle School. We've embarked on it now for a number of years, first through the application process and now through the implementation stages. That pride extends through our teaching staff into the student population. We believe it is truly an opportunity to transform much of how we instruct our children at Southside Middle School. And we thought it would be a great idea to invite Francesca and our principal, if she would be willing to start us off with a brief discussion of exactly where we are and what's going on. So thank you very much for joining us.
Just for a little bit of background information, quite a few years ago, actually, I'll just say that, quite a few years ago, when I first went to work in the middle school, there was a group of teachers that were being sent to Pittsburgh to be trained in the MYP, which is the middle years program of the International Baccalaureate. And it took from that time, which was approximately 17 years ago, till 4 years ago, when we were actually able to begin training, working on, implementing, and then we were authorized as a middle years program school. Just as the middle years program, the IB has a primary years program, PYP, MYP middle years program, and then the diploma program, which we have at the high school. So we have seen a lot of changes in the way the students think, the way the students are applying their knowledge, and understanding the world around us. So right now, I'm going to introduce Francesca Wasserman, who's our middle school MYP coordinator, who's going to give you a little bit more about what the MYP is and how it works.
So thank you, first of all, to everyone for giving me an opportunity to present tonight. I just really wanted to give you an overview of sort of what is the MYP, how does it benefit our students, what does it look like in our building, and then we'll also have an opportunity to hear from a couple of our students about what the MYP looks like and how it's changed things for them in the middle school. I just want to give you a little background. So the middle years program affects students in all 3 grade levels in our school building, in grades 6, 7, and 8. And we are a 100% inclusive program, which is not the norm, I would say, for the middle years. We have every single subject involved in our program, and every single student in the building is taking an MYP course. So one of the most common questions that we get when it comes to the middle years program is, how does learning actually look different? How do teachers approach teaching in a different way? How do the students learn in a different way? So for the different areas that I just wanted to touch on tonight was that the middle years program has an impressive emphasis on inquiry. So we're asking the students to think critically, we're asking them to be genuinely curious, and we want to evoke wonder. The second area that looks different with the MYP is a deeper level of transfer between subjects. So essentially what we're saying is that we want kids to walk from one subject area to another and be able to make natural connections that are deeper than what they would have made without this program or without emphasis on this. The third area is in real-world application. So many times students walk into a classroom and they ask, why do I need to know this? Where am I ever using this in my life? So one of the major influences of this program on the students' learning is that they actually understand where they will use this in the world. And we get the teachers help them to make those connections. And then lastly, connections to the community. We want students to become active members of their community in Rockville Center, but also in the world at large. And so the middle years program helps them to make those connections. Okay, so how do teachers benefit from the MYP? We're going to be looking a lot at what the students are doing, but there's a lot of benefit for the teachers in terms of professional development. So we've been revising curriculum for the last few years, and we've been really trying to look closer at what we do and why we do it. So there is sort of this underlying expectation that, of course, there'll be more curiosity within the students, but how do we build that? So part of it is through the professional development. That's really what's been inspiring us in part. So these are the different trainings that teachers in our school have been through in order to kind of bring our program to the next level. And in April, next month, we'll be sending 4 more teachers to attend an IB training where they'll learn about interdisciplinary units and how to craft them in a way that seems natural and kind of brings the learning to the next level. So these are some ways, I tried to include some photos of classrooms in our building, that we try to make thinking visible and try to inspire inquiry. So all of our units are structured in a way that allow for students to address factual, conceptual, and debatable questions. And these questions are posted at the beginning of every unit in every classroom. And then throughout the unit, we ask kids to actually make connections. So different teachers do this in different ways. The picture that you can see on the right is a 6th grade classroom where the ELA students are asked to, when they find a connection to one of the questions that the teacher posed at the beginning of the unit, they would put a Post-it up with their answer of how they've made connections to things that they've learned. And these questions are usually broad and overarching, and then the students make really specific connections to each of these ideas. Okay, so just a little introduction to interdisciplinary connections. I know I touched on it briefly a moment ago, but where our teaching has shifted is that instead of focusing so much on specific content that's really pinpointed, now we're looking at broader concepts so that students are able to make connections, and then we can dive deeper into those concepts and look at the content in a very different way. So, for example, one of the areas that we try to build conceptual understandings around is change. So the example here on the board is that what does change look like in social studies versus what does it look like in a math classroom? And how can kids walk out of social studies and understand that concept of change and then apply it to another totally, completely different subject? So they're actually able to build those connections that sometimes the teachers didn't necessarily intend, which is really where we understand that learning is taking place. And then performance tasks are where students are actually taking the content and maybe doing a project or extending the learning in some way. And so this asks students to really dive deeper into those conceptual understandings. Okay, here's an example of a human body unit that our ELA and science teachers in 6th grade had done. So some of the questions that the teachers asked the kids to come up with an idea, something that has to do with the human body that really evokes wonder, things that they're really curious about. So some of the things that they've asked is, what is brain freeze? Why do people snore? What causes a bruise? So things that they genuinely experience in real life, and then they want to know what are the causes of these things. And so students were asked to do research, make discovery, and it really got them to connect to their world and kind of extend their learning and their thinking. Okay, so more real-world application. These are just 3 different examples of how students are trying to connect their content to the real world. So sometimes it's teacher-guided, and sometimes it's these are things that the students came up with. But for example, in Social Studies 6, when they were learning about pollution in the Nile River, we were able to make connections to the water crisis in our country. So, okay, there's pollution going on somewhere else in the world, so is that it? Is there more to the story? Is there something that we can be doing to make a difference? And is there something that we can do at home? And then in the Math 7 unit, kids are always saying, when am I ever going to use this concept? So when we talk about 1- and 2-step equations, how do we set them up? But then where do we use them? So in this case, students were given a budget and they had to figure out what options they had. Should I invest extra money in the really high-end car? Or should I save my money for something involving my living situation, my home? So they were able to kind of master the budget concept through these equations. And then lastly, this is a topic that we've talked about at past board meetings, the 8th grade ELA students are doing an oppression unit where they're studying, they read A Raisin in the Sun, they learn about the Holocaust, they study different speeches like Malala Yousafzai's speech to the United Nations, and the students and they also read an independent reading book on a topic that involves oppression, and then they have to advocate for that group of people and raise awareness for a cause. Students are then asked to create a public service announcement where they raise awareness about the issue, and then talk about what other students can do in order to make a difference now. So it's always about extending their thinking and applying it to the real world. Okay? And then service is a major component, just kind of extending what we were just saying about application. Service is where students are taking what they've learned in the classroom and then, of course, trying to help people. So this is just another example. In Social Studies 7, they were learning about propaganda. And so where propaganda usually has such a negative spin, the social studies teachers thought maybe we can actually use this to raise awareness as well. So now there's a service component with the real world connection. And so they asked the students to look at current events and figure out how can we take this current event and encourage responsible action, change their thinking a little bit, and to make the world a more peaceful place. And so students were creating propaganda posters that had a positive spin rather than a negative spin. So it wasn't so much brainwashing and pushing things on people. It was really about learning about the methods of persuasion and then using it for a better cause. Okay, and then each year, at the end of the year, the 8th graders are involved in a community project fair. This is a project that all 8th graders are encouraged to participate in, and the students come up with their own topics to explore where they can make a difference in the world, in their community, in their state. They get to choose what their community sounds like or what it looks like. So it can be something from a very small scale project that affects the people on their street all the way up to affecting something in the world. And students are then asked to present their projects at the fair. So I included a picture of what our fair looked like last year. This fair was held in the Southside Middle School gym. And so each group or students were able to work in groups of 1 through 3, number of people, and they presented tri-boards to show what their project involved. And each of them had to include like a who, what, when, where, why, and how of their project, so we would all understand, including 6th graders and 7th graders, what their project was, who it affected, and then what kind of implication it has for the future for sustainability. Okay, and here's some projects just so you can get a closer look. So kids were doing all kinds of things, sickle cell anemia, helping to save the earth. Okay. And we just wanted to thank you because our students are doing some pretty amazing things at Southside Middle School. So I'd like to introduce Liz Vopel and Christina Profanis to come on up and just talk a little bit about their experience with the MYP.
The MYP program helps students make connections between what we are learning in our classes and how they can be applied to our everyday lives. For example, we had an algebra project last quarter, which was scored with the MYP rubric. It gave us problems about a family that needed to rent a car and had to figure out which company would cost them less. Before this project, I was struggling to understand how what I was learning in the unit could be applied to my life. The MYP program and rubric helped me make these connections. Students can also make connections between more than one subject. We are just starting to learn about the Holocaust in language arts, and we'll be learning about it in social studies and also studio art. Also, we learned about the Dust Bowl in both earth science and social studies. We are fortunate that we have the opportunity to understand so much about one topic by learning about it in multiple subjects.
Sorry. Okay, I'll just hold it. Okay. The MYP program is very helpful and useful to me for several reasons. In school, when teachers give me projects or assignments to do that are graded with the MYP rubric, they help me understand the topic we are learning about. Through these assignments, they help me understand why we are learning about this topic in school and how it can connect to the world today. For example, in language arts, we have to pick a book about oppression in the past and then do a PSA project about it. This has helped me understand that these issues are still happening today and made me thankful for the people who stood up for what they believed because they have affected the world today. The MYP rubrics are also very helpful to me. Before I finish a project, I always check the rubric to make sure that I completed the task and that I did the best I could. From looking at the rubric, it helps me realize how I could make my project or assignment better. I'm very glad we have the MYP program at our school to help me become a better student.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill, the Youth Pride Survey, I'm sorry, and the Rockville Center Coalition update?
I think Noreen can handle it.
Maybe she can.
Try. So a few months ago, I was before the board talking about the the work of the Rockville Center Coalition for Youth and Rockville Center Alcohol, Drug, and Violence Prevention Task Force. And I'm here tonight to talk about a specific function of that coalition, which is the results of the Youth Pride Survey that we gave to students last year. The Rockville Center Task Force, which has been part of the district's work for decades, was given a booster shot when we became a part of the Coalition for Youth. The Coalition for Youth is an organization that in 2014 formed, and in 2015 was earned a $625,000 grant over 5 years to work against substance use and abuse in Rockville Center. So pretty amazing. That was amazing in and of itself, the funds. But what really was amazing is they pulled together these 12 sectors listed. Schools, of course, are obvious. Businesses and civic organizations like the Lions Club. Churches, the work of the Vineyard Church and St. Agnes. Parents, representative, our own PTA. Healthcare, Mercy Hospital. Youth organizations, including our Youth Council and youth serving organizations. Community volunteers, prevention experts like Confide, the media, the Herald, and law enforcement, our police department, and of course our government, our village board and mayor. We all came together and meet very regularly to work on this very important task. The work of the coalition can be seen in a number of areas. I'm sure if you read through these, you've seen some of our poster contests, our t-shirt designs, the awareness through the arts, the mannequin project, the sneaker project done by the Youth Council, Sticker Shock, stickers that went onto pizza boxes, our family fitness fair, education in the form of school-based initiatives and assemblies, parent presentations, our Too Good for Drug program. Friends of Mercy formed a symposium, organized a symposium rather at Malloy College recently. The school district became an opioid antagonist program. Confide continues its treatment and recovery. Our government agencies are at work. We were recognized in Albany by both the Senate and the representatives. Senator Kaminsky helped to recognize there. That was wonderful. The coalition has allowed many more speakers in our schools, including Larry Glens, who lost a son to a heroin overdose, and Chris Herron, who I'll talk about a little bit, who's coming next week. So there's been many, many, many functions of the coalition, and we couldn't really have done these things without these additional funds. The school district is also associated with the Office of Alcoholism, Substance Abuse Services, or OASIS. And what that does for us is OASIS, the state organization that oversees one of the nation's largest addiction service systems. They also subsidize workers in school districts. So one of our social workers' salaries is partially subsidized by OASIS. And she works very closely with the coalition. In Rockville Center, that's LaToya Gamble here at the high school. They also do audits of our work to make sure that we're continuing in education and awareness. Both the Coalition for Youth and OASIS require that we check to see if what we're doing is effective. And they ask us to do that by periodically surveying students. And so every couple of years, we have surveyed our students. And the spring of 2017 was our most recent survey. We used the New York State Youth Development Survey. Students in grades 8 through 12 were surveyed. And this survey, what it does is it assesses the risk and protective factors that cause or prevent substance use in our students. It also measures the amount of use as reported by the students. So we were able to survey Okay. We were able to survey 1,114 students. It's broken down on this slide. And I said the survey identifies risk factors and protective factors. The risk and protective factor prevention is based on a pretty simple premise, that in order to identify how to stop a problem, you have to know what causes it in the first place. So they look for the highest percentage of students, they identify risk, and the lowest percentage of students that identify protective factors. Risk factors and protective factors are categorized by family, community, school, and the individual. Protective factors will exert a positive influence and counteract the effects of the risk factors. Some of the protective factors identified are social bonding to their family and healthy beliefs and clear standards about behavior. I'm not going to read these to you, but you can see these are the domains that I mentioned: community, family. The next slide will be school and individual. And what risk factors are assessed in this survey. Here are the protective factors that they look for. They attach to their family. Do families reward them for pro-social involvement? Does the school do the same? So we do identify the highest risk factors. We get the survey back and they show us in graphic form. In Rockville Center, it has pretty consistently been over the last several surveys parental attitudes that are favorable for antisocial behavior and the rewards, the peer rewards that students get for participating in antisocial behavior. The second one is a little bit of a peer pressure. The first one is concerning to us, and that is how parents, how at least students perceive their parents feel about their participation in the use of drugs and alcohol. The second highest risk factor was perceived availability of drugs and laws and norms favorable to drug use. Detective DeLuca got all upset at that one. But one thing that reason I'm not going to overemphasize these is the percentage of students that identified that as a risk factor was actually pretty low. The other ones were a little bit higher. The protective factors that are pretty routinely listed are opportunities for pro-social involvement, and that's across all 4 domains, which is really a good thing, and we work very hard at that at the school and the community level. And the students perceived the amount of opportunities for pro-social behaviors in greater percentages than they perceived rewards for that behavior. I just want you to kind of process that a little bit. They see these opportunities, they're not so sure it's rewarded and valued to the extent that at least they anticipated it would. So that's for us to work on. I wanted to show you what the survey showed in terms of use. It goes grade 8 to grade 12, and I just took the 4 highest percentages of substances used as indicated by the survey: alcohol, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and marijuana. And I'll tell you that this is the start of a story that's kind of interesting. You could see under alcohol, the first number before the slash in each of the grade boxes is the percentage of students that reported to have used that substance in the last 30 days. The second number is the percentage of students that reported to have used that substance any time in their life. And you can see, as you might predict, it goes up increasingly higher as the kids get older, to what I consider somewhat alarming rates in grade 12, where they're still well below the legal age for drinking, and yet 77.4% of our students reported that they had drank at one point in their lifetime. Now look at the column for cigarettes. It is significantly lower. The message about cigarettes is out. Smoking, bad. Drinking, not so bad. So if you read across here, and you could read the other percentages as well, that develops as a theme as we go through. We also have to, for the coalition, show the federal government that we're making some headway. And it appears we may have. Well, this is a little bit difficult to interpret because obviously we're surveying a whole different group of students, and there are a lot of variables that affect these. You could at least see some trends. So we were kind of encouraged by this. The comparison of the youth survey from 2014 to the 2017 surveys, with the exception of a slight uptick in 8th and 12th grade, we saw some significant percentage declines in reported use of alcohol. We also saw that decrease in reported binge drinking. So both of those really, I think, are very, very favorable in terms of the work of the coalition. Some other interesting responses. Here you'll see the theme again. Over 80% of students do not have friends who smoke. I was in high school. I knew most of my class smoked. Over 80% do not have friends who smoke, but only 38% report not having any friends that have drank in the last 12 months, which is pretty disturbing. 90% of students say there is little chance that they would be considered cool if they smoked. But only 50% of students said there's little or no chance that they would be considered cool if they drank. Over 90% of students think smoking is wrong or very wrong. Only 57% of students think drinking is wrong or very wrong. 94% of students say their parents think it's really wrong for them to smoke, and only 82% say their parents say it's very wrong for them to drink. So, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but you could really see that we have done a really good job, we as a large community, the world, the nation. Smoking is dangerous and deadly, particularly for young people. I'm not sure we've gotten the same message out about the drinking. Some troubling findings. 27% of students report having had 5 or more alcoholic drinks in a row at least once. Only 55% of students said they've talked to their parents about drinking. 72% of students say it's sort of easy or very easy to get alcohol. As you might predict, only 49% say it's easy to get cigarettes. And students say that only 30% of adults in the neighborhood find drinking very wrong. The good news is that in very high percentages, students tell us they don't drink and drive. Also a message that I think we've gotten out very clearly as a nation. Very high percentages of students acknowledge seeing or reading our prevention messages, which made us very happy. And 99.9% report they have not used heroin. In fact, hard drugs, it barely made a radar blip in this survey, which was very encouraging. Over 98% say they see lots of chances for involvement in sports and clubs. And 14% of students reported having been bullied, and that's about 6% below the national average of 20%. So also good news. I want to introduce someone who's been very important to our work. Our president of our Rockville Center Youth Council, Lily Call. And she's going to come up and talk to us a little bit about this survey, just for a minute. Come on up, Lily. She's had a very busy day. But there's some people that tell us or think that the kids don't take the survey seriously, although we do a lot of work. And the schools have helped us do a lot of work in helping to make it a very serious administration. And some say that, it's not worth all this effort. So Lily, we work very closely in the coalition together, and at our last meeting, she spoke up about this.
Hi, thank you for having me, first of all. This survey that we take in school, I remember taking it, we sat in the school auditorium, everybody had their own clipboard and their own iPad, everybody was spread out and it was very quiet. We were told that we had to take a very extensive survey, and they were right. But I think that the point was that these questions are very personal, and I believe that from the numbers that we see and from what I know from being in school, around my peers, they're correct. These students do take this very seriously. The environment that we're put in taking the test, I think, is what makes it so genuine. The numbers are very good. I think that overall, it is a great thing to have in our school system, and it really does show improvement with the coalition and what the youth council and everyone does. So I think overall that this is correct and accurate, and it's a great thing to have, I think. So thank you.
So why do we do the work? We do the work because there's still a really, really big problem in this nation, a growing opioid problem that you all have heard about, heroin in particular. In 1980, there were 5,000 overdose deaths. In 2015, there were 16,000. In 2016, there were 509 deaths to overdose in Nassau County. And in 2017, while we don't have the numbers yet, it was looking to well exceed that, which is very scary. I was very pleased that at least that didn't come through in our survey, but we have not been without tragedy in Rockville Center regarding this latest crisis, so we continue to do our work. Because all of these things, all of these more dangerous drugs start, 90% of people that are addicted to anything started when they were kids, they were teenagers, which is why that we do the work now. I also wanted to introduce, if you just raise your hand, Ruth McCormick, who is the secretary for the project manager for the Coalition for Youth, Lisa Spatz, works for the Coalition for Youth, the Lions Club, Lily you met, and Andrea Connolly, who is the adult volunteer who coordinates the Rockville Center Youth Council. And she's an angel, saint. She puts in a lot of time for these kids. The final thing I want to talk about is, again, one more thing the Coalition's doing, and that is on March 20th at 7 p.m. at Southside High School. Chris Herron, as a former NBA basketball player, is going to present the Chris Herron story. He's a former professional athlete who became addicted to heroin, and he is telling a very compelling story of recovery, and it's filling up very quickly. Ruth Ann, how many are registered at this point?
670.
670. So we're looking at the registration cuts off at 700. So when you come in on Tuesday night, you can walk in if you want to risk that. You can, and we encourage you to walk in. We have about 850, Dr. J, you told me, right, seats in the high school. So the people that have registered, and the link is on our website, they will be ushered into the auditorium. If you have not registered and you're walk-in, we're going to send you to 4 overflow rooms where we'll be streaming the presentation. And then if we find out there's more room in the auditorium, we'll move people back in. But we're doing that just to be able to keep things moving in. We will have 2 registration tables when you walk in, and we're going to be checking your registration. Partially because we need to check it for the event, but also partially for security that evening because we anticipate a very large crowd. Oh, let me just mention one more thing. I'm wearing the orange school safety ribbon, but I also have a purple ribbon on. The purple ribbon represents Chris Herron's Purple Project initiative. He asked that everybody that comes to the event wears purple and wears purple in school that day. I actually have a purple dress. I'm very happy. But these ribbons are going to be distributed. I put some out for everyone on the dais, so please do show your support for this project on March 20th by wearing purple. Thank you.
No, no bother.
All right, we're into the public work session of our meeting. Before we begin, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to my left, the end of the table. There's an administrator who's made the district spend money on stationery and signage. He received his doctorate when, Chris? We're very proud of his accomplishment, and his family, and he also shared that pride. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Congratulations, Chris.
Very.
You getting nervous?
You should, right. Just one or two words again. I also want to add my voice to those who have been congratulating Chris for the work that he has done. It's so interesting, we are an educational institution. We purport to be always encouraging people to become lifelong learners. And Chris is a very, very good example of exactly what that means to all of us here within this system. He has achieved a goal that I know which was dear to his heart and something that he worked towards without losing one step in the responsibilities that he's assigned on a regular basis. I'm not wanting to guess what that did to eating into your family time, but I know that you were able to do everything that we had asked you to do, and at the same time, find time to complete your studies. We're very proud of you, Chris. I can tell you that it's a wonderful achievement, and welcome to the club, I guess.
I'm going to have to speak now because, thank you very much, everyone in this room, parents and board members, and Dr. Johnson, and principal, everyone in this room, please know that you had a part in this and inspired me and pushed me to do this. For myself, yes, and my family, but for this community as well. You guys took me in 10 years ago, exactly my 10th year, and I'm just very proud to be a part of this community and part of what we've built here. And everyone here, again, had a role in that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Dr. Johnson, proposed 2018-19 budget. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, look, our budget this year is again, a kind of a work of art in the sense that we have to create and develop a spending plan for next year. We work with our administrators, certainly Mr. Bartels does, from early November right on through, even this afternoon, working on ways in which we can find the resources necessary to continue with the programs that we have within the school district. The way in which we're going to do this is to ask Mr. Bartels, please, if he would, to provide us with an overall summary of exactly where we are at this point. At the last meeting, we made the decision to postpone our discussion, so we're going to crowd a lot of what we would have ordinarily done over 2 meetings into a single meeting tonight. But we certainly welcome the opportunity to engage with the board in a discussion of this incredibly important document. So, Mr. Bartels, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I think what we're going to do here is go through my presentation, which will give everybody kind of a bird's eye view of the budget, see what the major obstacles that we're going to be encountering during this process. I think it's interesting for some of the administrators to see this as well, because this will be kind of the first time they see it. They know their own individual budgets, but they have to see how it comes together overall for the district. So I'll go through this. You'll see the overview, and then we'll get down into individual questions from the board and the community on a line-by-line type budget. So we start, as Dr. Johnson said, usually in November. We get input from all of our buildings, all of our administrators, and we put that into a budget format. We go through reviews of that. I review that with each administrator, usually in January and February, and put together this budget. We have a tax limit calculation that is due on March 1st. That is what they call the tax cap. And there's a lot of confusion over the tax cap. The tax cap is usually considered a 2% cap. It's not really a 2% cap. There's a large formula that goes into it. This year, the formula starts with 2%, but there are other adjustments back and forth, and I'll explain that a little later in the process. So our tax cap for this year is really 3.03%. So we're going to be a little under that, but that's where our tax cap is for this year. These next three pieces, budget overview, administration budget review, and instructional budget review, we're going to be split over several meetings. They're now all in this meeting. I will mention some stuff on staffing briefly, but we're really still working on our staffing recommendations with the other administrators, and we'll have a more detailed discussion of staffing at our next budget session on March 27th. On April 17th, we'll have a preliminary budget hearing. That is the absolute last time that we will have to make any changes to the budget before we get it ready to be voted on. On May 2nd, there is a formal budget hearing that's required by the state. We cannot make any changes at that point. And then on May 15th, we're going to have the annual election and the budget vote. Okay, so issues impacting the budget this year. As I mentioned, CPI for this year is 2%. That's the number that goes into the formula.
CPI means?
CPI is a consumer price index. That's the increase, the annual increase that the state uses. The actual CPI was 2.13, but it's limited to 2% in law. That's the highest it can go for our calculations. There are a number of exemptions that go into the formula. Most of those have to do with debt service and pilots. So those are pieces that are excluded from the cap. Pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. That's income that we get separately from the taxes for properties that are given abatements. So they pay something called a payment in lieu of taxes. That number can go up or down each year. That number will impact the tax cap formula. So will any debt service increases or decreases that we have, as well as any increases in our transfer to capital budget lines. There is also another factor in here which really had a big impact on us this year. That's a growth factor. Some of you may have seen an article in Newsday about this a few weeks back. They talked about there was another error from Nassau County Assessor's Office in calculating the growth factors. So our growth factor, instead of being basically flat, turned out to be a 5% increase, which turned out to be a relatively large number for us. So that was, those are some of the shifts in this formula that they use to calculate the tax limit. Our last debt service increase due to the bond is in this budget. It's about $203,000. That is being offset by an increase of $400,000 in new building aid and revenue increases. When we had talked about the bond, we talked about building aid that we get for our expenses. And you can see you get your aid after you have the expenses and you file your final cost report. So while this is the last year that we're getting increases in the budget for the debt service, it's actually the first year that we're starting to see the increases in the building aid come back. So we have $400,000 increase in revenue for next year. In the next couple of years, hopefully that number will go up a little further. Security upgrades district-wide. We had a long discussion about this at the last board meeting. We do have something called a smart bond, which We have about $500,000 in projects up at the state, which is really just sitting there. We want to get moving on that. So we're going to start to work on those. Also, we're looking at greater security for our buildings, other ways that we can make our buildings safer for our students. So we talked a lot about that at the last meeting, and there's money in the budgets to account for a number of those changes. Staffing additions. We've had a great number of staffing additions in our budget this year. Every year we put in budget for contingencies for various staff members due to certain things going on throughout the year with one-to-one assignments for some special needs students, other special services in speech, special education, E&L, and basically we utilized all our contingencies that we had for this year's budget and then some. So one of the things we're doing now is the board has authorized us to move forward with security guards at each of our elementary schools. So that's, again, something that's not in our current budget, but we're moving forward with that, and that will be part of the personnel that's in the budget for next year as well. Health insurance premium increases. We've had positive experience for the last couple of years, but for 2017 and 2018, the premium increases are such that it's really having an impact on our budget for this year. We had a premium increase of over 8% for a calendar year 2018, which followed a 12% increase for 2017. And that was after 5 consecutive years where the premium increases were under 7%. We've been able to keep that budget line pretty stable. We've had negotiations with our bargaining units that has allowed us to keep those numbers down, but that will show a large increase for 2018-19 budget. The TRS employer contribution rate, that's a number that's gone down for the last 3 years. It is now turning around and going back up again. So we've seen a few years where we've been able to decrease that budget line, which has been a great assistance in the budget process and our planning. That number is now turning around, so we're not going to be able to see that. We actually have to increase that budget line by a few $100,000 for next year. Transportation contract reductions. We belong to a transportation cooperative. Every year we go out for competitive bidding. The largest price differentials are on our private school contracts because that could change dramatically from one year to the next depending on where students are going to private schools or where we place them in special education schools. So those numbers can change dramatically from one year to the next. We continue to work in a cooperative bidding process through Nassau County, and that helps keep those numbers down. Our special ed program. We've had great success with our RISE and CORE programs. We also have a summer school program now and private placements that we have that we try to keep as many students as we can in district, which is one of the reasons for the implementation of those programs. They all will show some savings. We're able to keep a number of students in district this year and hopefully for next year. So you'll see in some of those budget lines, we're able to actually reduce some of those lines this year. And you'll see when we get into the overall special ed budget, some of the charts we have later, you'll see how some years they go up, some years they come down. So that always has an impact on the budget. Some years it's positive, some years it's negative. Negotiations. Right now we have settlements with all of our bargaining units. We don't have anybody open right now that we're negotiating with. The next one will be the teachers coming around again. Their contract expires at the end of next calendar year. The last settlements we've had were with our administrators, security guards, and our custodial maintenance bargaining units. As an overview for the budget, we started saying this a few years ago with the tax limit. We kind of changed the way we do the budget. We work backwards. We used to always work on our expenses, figure out what the budget we needed was, and then we would go back to our revenues and see how we were going to fund that budget. With the advent of the tax cap, it's very difficult to do that now because we really need to start knowing with our revenues, how much we're going to have before we can even get into our expenses and how much we can increase the budget. So with our tax levy calculation, I have a 2.97% increase, which is a $2.75 million increase in taxes. That is under our tax cap of 3.03%. I'm looking at an increase of $500,000 in state aid for next year. $400,000 of that is due to building aid, and we're certainly hoping that we can increase that number when the final state budget comes out. Hopefully we'll have some more state aid that we may be able to apply to that figure. Our non-resident tuitions from our RISE and our CORE program. Again, this is one of the positives of those programs. In addition to keeping our students here and being able to educate some students from other districts, they then pay tuitions to attend our programs. We're able to increase that revenue line by another $200,000 for next year. So that's a great help. We have other sources of revenue from our summer school programs, from our Project Great programs, from our community education programs, and some other different local revenues that we have. And we're looking at an increase there of about $368,000. So we do have a number of forms of revenue that have been increasing, so that is helping with our budget process this year. We also have reserves. They are dwindling, but we do have reserves. We're going to put a transfer from the ERS reserve. Last year we transferred $400,000. This year we're going to transfer $500,000, so an increase of $100,000 there. We also have a debt service reserve. As I mentioned earlier, we were going to put a number of security investment plans into this budget, so we have monies in capital lines for that. We're going to take money, $400,000 from our debt service reserve to assist in spending that, since those should be one-time expenses. We get our buildings secured, and we can utilize that money as a one-time expense to offset that. It will reduce that reserve, but it's not an ongoing, continuing expense, so we don't have to worry about that in future years. We're also going to apply another $2.8 million in fund balance. This has kind of been a standard for Rockville Center. Each year, we have extra monies from either underspending the budget or producing more revenue than we had expected. We return a lot of that extra money that we have to the taxpayers to support the following year's budget. So that's going to be $2.8 million. Again, another Newsday article recently came out criticizing another school district for having very high reserves and fund balance. Just so we know, in Rockville Center, our reserve is approximately 10% of our budget. So the total amount of monies that we have in reserve are approximately 10% of our total budget. We have $2.8 million of that is applied every year. So we're applying about 25% of our total reserve every year to help support the following year's budget. Just as a form of reference, the average number in Nassau County is at 20% of budget for their reserves. So we're not one of the districts that has millions and millions of dollars in reserve. We have certain reserves that we use. We try to use every year as best we can. If we have some extra funds from one year to the next, we try to supplement those reserves so we continue to have them. But we do not have an excess of reserves as a number of our other neighboring districts may have. So let's go back to the revenue. So that gives us an increase in revenues of 3.85%, about $4.3 million. So that's basically how much we can increase our budget. Now when we look at our overall overview for the budget increases, we have payroll increases. This is taking our current staff, everybody that we have currently, moving them forward to next year. Those contractual increases are about $2.2 million. We have new staffing and contingent staffing. This is what I was talking about. We still need to work these out with our administrators to come up with a finalized plan. It's going to cover a number of different areas, including some special ed needs, one-to-one assistance, security guards, a number of different things. But we need a little more time with the administrators to kind of formalize that. And we still have a little bit of a gap, which I'll explain in a second. So there's still quite a bit of discussion we need to do on personnel. Capital transfer, for the security, we increased that capital transfer line by $700,000 to address a number of those security enhancements to our buildings. The debt service increase that I had mentioned of about $203,000. Our employees we have two retirement system contributions we need to make. One is to the employees retirement system. That is for civil service employees that we have. The other is to the teachers retirement system, which is for all our teachers and administrators. So those are increases in those contributions that we're required to make. That's a number that the state retirement systems determine. They tell us how much we have to contribute. That's how much we have to contribute. We have no say in that other than teacher salaries and what we calculated on, but the percentage is generated by the state. Our health insurance increase for this year is going to be $700,000. As I mentioned before with the premiums. In our BOCES special ed tuitions, we're able to pull a lot of students back from BOCES for next year, and actually in this year and in next year, which is going to result in a reduction of almost $500,000, which is a great positive there. We do have an increase in some of our private school special education tuitions of about $151,000, but overall there's a nice reduction in our tuition payments for our special education students. We have an increase in FICA, which really just goes along with the salaries. And once you get through those changes, the entire changes to everything else in the budget is an increase of about $210,000. So that's all our supplies, equipment, all of the administrators' budget lines. Really everything else leaves you with an increase of $210,000. So overall, that's a $5.1 million increase on the expense side. I'm just going to skip through this quick. There's just a little more detail on the overview salaries that we've had every year. When we do our negotiations with the bargaining units, we try to keep the total cost of the contracts under 2%. We've been able to do that with each of our bargaining units, and they've all been terrific in working with us to do just that. And that's allowed us to continue to move forward and keep all of our programs intact. It includes all current staffing, no cuts. And again, the additional staffing we have is a little over $900,000 that we'll talk about in more detail in the next meeting. The employer contribution rate, as I said, the employees' retirement system, the teachers' retirement system. It's interesting, there is monies, they allow us to accrue monies and reserves for the employees' retirement system, but not for the teachers' retirement system. It's just one of the quirks of the accounting rules that we have to follow in New York State. So while our budget line will increase by $100,000, it's going to be offset by a projected revenue increase from our reserve of $500,000, going up from $400,000 from last year. So that increase is being offset. And the teachers' retirement system will be directly impacting the budget. This is just a history of the teachers' retirement system costs, which is put a chart in here because it's a very large impact on the budget. And you can see how our budget amounts and our actual amounts have increased, over a number of years. Then they came way back down. It's a lot of money, a lot of changes, but it has a big impact on our budget from one year to the next. It's the impact of the tax cap on the tax levy. The tax levy for last year was $92.5 million. The allowable increase we have due to the tax cap was $2,302,000. The allowable increase due to the exemptions that I had talked about when we go through that formula is $503,000, which gives us our maximum allowable tax levy. So that's kind of how the calculation works to 3.03%. The maximum tax increase we would be allowed without exceeding the cap would be $2,805,000. we're going to increase we're planning to increase by $2,750,000, so we will be under the tax cap, as I mentioned, at 2.97%. The budget for the current year is $112,682,000. We have a projected increase of $5.1 million, or about 4.5%. We subtract the increase allowable to the tax cap and exemptions. We still have about $2.4 million that needs to be funded. We go through some of the other revenue increases that I had mentioned before. So we pick up another $1.5 million here. As a quick summary, with a proposed budget of $117,827,000 at this point, we have a total amount in revenues of $117 million, just over that. So our budget is not balanced, and we still have a lot of work to do. It leaves us with a gap of $800,000. So that's really what we need to work on with our staffing, with our budget, with the questions as we go through some of these line by lines. And that's kind of the overview. I'm going to kind of look at it a couple of different ways now. Looking at the school budget by the type of expense that we have. We break it out into a pie chart, and you can see that payroll and benefits make up more than 75% of the entire budget. So when we talk about all of the administrators and all of their budgets, they are, much smaller. There's not too much much more we can get out of them. So that's the majority of our budget is in staffing, which is really where it should be. What we're going to do when we go through the budget today, we have a number of different types of administration codes. We're going to go through the budget in a similar format as it's presented in our budget brochure, as it's required to be presented by the state, which is by different functional area. We have a 2-page budget summary, which kind of lists the summaries by budget area, and then we have about a 22-page line-by-line detail, which kind of flows through the entire budget. So we have our administrative codes we're going to go through. Again, they were going to be broken up, but we're going to try to go through everything tonight, and then March 28th we'll have our staffing discussion. These are just charts of our administrators' budgets. Put a little bit of a history here, and then you can see the change from 17-18 to 18-19. A number of years ago, the administrators kind of realized that any increase that they were putting in their budgets was getting knocked out, so they don't put any increases in their budgets anymore. So they try to just come in basically the same or slightly less than what they were the year before. This is just a bar chart summary, which you can kind of see that each year everybody goes down slightly. Watson had a blip one year because we looked at them once. They had a large increasing population, and when we kind of looked at the dollars per pupil that they were getting, there was a big difference between them and everybody else, so we made one little adjustment for them. But everybody else has been pretty much flat. At our secondary level and our directors for art, music, and athletics, again, you see pretty much similar. High school has a lot of other things going on, not just supplies, but they have other programs that they're running, so that's why there's a little more of a change in their budget lines. And you see the line charts for those. Again, for the most part, they're pretty consistent. Some of our other administrators, when we break it down, we have curriculum, technology, data processing. These all fall under Mr. Pelletieri.
Thanks, Robert.
Oh, don't worry, mine are a lot higher. Dr. Pelletieri. As you can see, some areas of Chris's come down quite a bit, some are going up. Again, they're the vagaries in the budget, and we'll talk about some of those as we go through in the detail. This is what his bar charts look like. And sometimes some of them go up, some come down. Superintendent, district clerk, business office, and security budget codes. Security used to be very different. That's just for some small supplies. That's not our staffing. That's not what I was just talking about as far as increasing. This is really more for supplies and materials for our security staff. That's why that number is so low. So again, what's that?
How are we going to hold that number with the new security guards?
It may need a little more. Not much more. It's really, we provide them with certain clothing, uniforms, security vests, walkie-talkies, and so forth. So it should not be a tremendous difference. We're adding 5 security guards. We have, I believe, 16, 17 between the middle school and the high school. So it should not be a huge change. It's these charts.
Doesn't look good for you.
Does not touch. I said to Chris.
This is Robert's chart.
Mine are going to look worse.
Climbing ladder.
It keeps going up too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is business, and
What's happening?
it's going to be insurance codes and things that we're going to get to. So, these are Noreen's budget codes. Dr. Leahy, she has special education, summer school, and community ed. You can see this is one of the nice years where we see a nice reduction. She's been able to help us out in this budget year, which is terrific. Hard to see your smaller budgets, but the large budget, the big difference, you can see how you have fairly large swings in her budgets. It all depends year to year where our students are going and who we have. And these are really the big budgets. Benefits, payroll, transportation, and facilities, much larger for the most part than some of the others. As I said, benefits and payroll are more than 75% of the budget. So, and you see that's where our increases are really tied to. And that payroll increase is up around 5% because we have a number of additional staff in there. Between contingency and new staff recommendations at this point, it's a little over $900,000. So that's where most of those payroll increases are. Benefit increases have to do with the health insurance and the retirement system costs. These numbers aren't so stable. These seem to continually go up, both benefits and payroll. Transportation, we've been able to keep fairly stable, as with our facilities. Our debt service, again, we've been increasing the last couple of years due to the bond. That now is hopefully maxed out. We also have an increase in there for next year for the transfer to capital. That's another reason that last line is, the light blue line is picked way up. So that's what that is, and that will be offset by revenue, some in this year and then again in future years. And then just going kind of real overview, general support. You'll see when we go through the budget, in addition to the functional areas, they're broken up into kind of 5 major areas: general support, instructional support, transportation, youth services and community service, and then employee benefits. In our general support area, overall, that's up about 1.5%. Our instructional area, most of our staffing is up 4.2%. Transportation is up a slight amount, a little less than 1%. Our youth and community services, pretty much flat, very, very little change there. And we call our undistributed expenses, which is employee benefits and debt service. is up the largest amount, 6.83%. So that's my presentation. We get into the detail.
Thank you, Mr. Bartell. Robert has the hardest job to make this, a feel-good or anything like that, the budget lines. It's very difficult to go through the process and
It is.
be
It's a long
captivated by it.
It's a long process, and there's a lot of detail within these numbers, and so much of it is repetitive from one building to the next or one budget line to the next. And it becomes very frustrating when there's large parts of the budget, like benefits, health insurance, and premiums, and retirement system contributions that you really don't have a control over. So,
Thank you. All right. So we will go through. Any board member care to start? Questions? How do you want it to be down? Just go.
Well, before we even go start line by line, just some questions on your overview. Building aid. There was a lot of talk that building aid might be capped and might cease to exist. Is our building aid what it's going to be? Do we have fears that we might lose some of our building aid in the future?
right now, we believe our building aid is intact, and we should get the increases, even if there are some caps on them from year to year. Dr. Johnson may have more information on it from his discussion. He has more discussions at the state level about this. We don't think the caps on building aid and transportation will end up in the final version of the budget by the state legislature. So we're very hopeful that it really should not have an impact. Even if there were a cap, I believe the increases we would have would be covered. If not in 1 year, in a couple of years, we'd have all of our money that we need.
Okay. When do we get the, quote, final runs from the state?
When the state has a final budget, which, they've been pretty good for the last couple of years. They used to go late into the summer and well past our budget votes, but if Dr. Johnson has...
Every indication is right now that they will complete their work by the end of March and have it ready for April 1st. There's nothing to suggest otherwise at this point.
Okay.
All right? So I think we'll know before our April meeting, where we have our preliminary budget hearing. We should know. All right? We're not going to know.
But we might not know by our next meeting, by our March 27th.
No, we will, no. That's put out on midnight the night before. No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's rare that you ever get any indication. No, we're not going to know.
Okay.
All right, first if you want. I'm looking at, we typically like to question you on the increases and question why. You have a decrease in the treasurer 1325 line.
We moved that into the 1310 line. That's why there's such a large increase there.
So it's just moving around numbers.
Right.
I thought you were saving us a lot of money.
Unfortunately, it's better coded into that other line. The person's a certified person working more in the business office. They are the treasurer, but the costs are being reported in the business office line at this point.
Okay, thank you. On that same page, data processing, it's 13.79% increase here, 1680, but on the slide presentation, it seemed like it was a much higher number overall.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Pelletieri, or Dr. Pelletieri, I'm sorry.
Could you just give me the,
I'm on the two-page version where 1680,
1680 in total?
it's only 13.79 increase there, but the slide presentation had the number much higher.
Right, I believe that takes into account some other codes. It's not just that particular budget code. So I think that it's not just the 1680 budget line that goes into the data processing.
What is it that's making data
So-
processing increase so much?
In that line, there's 1680, 4030, 430, 10, 9000. There's maintenance agreements in there. The big bump in there is a product we call AirWatch, which is a student management system for our iPads. We did not have to, we had paid for that in prior years, the prior 2 years, with a 3-year agreement that took place 3 years ago. That agreement's up now, so we're back to a 1-year deal right now, and that's a big increase there, and that's why that percentage is there, because it wasn't there last year. Mike's been working with the company, trying to beat them up to get their price down and try to get us into another 3-year cycle. But right now, that company was sold, purchased by a new company who wants it annually right now.
Before we go further down, do you mind if I jump in? Going back up, can we talk about legal fees? I know we're flat this year, but we're still in like $220,000. Are we, I mean, we've been coming down over the past couple of years.
We have been coming down. We actually generated a good chunk of that in fund balance from our 16-17 budget. We will not be generating that in the 17-18 budget. We've had a number of impartial hearings that have been taking up quite a bit of that. We also had the issue with transportation earlier in the year, which required an awful lot of intervention from our attorneys. Those are a couple of items that we don't typically experience, which did have a large impact on that. So we're going to pretty much use our entire budget line for this year. So we have the same plan for next year before we try to reduce it any further.
Hoping we don't use it. Okay.
Robert, I just wanted to be clear on something. So Noreen with special ed, she had a decrease, and that's really because of the tuitions that we've had coming in?
Yes,
'Cause I
correct.
just want people to be clear, it's not that we're decreasing special ed services or we're taking anything away.
No, absolutely not. I'd ask Noreen to explain further, but she's...
Just,
I'll answer for Noreen.
I know.
Chris, could you handle the decrease in expenses has more to do with tuitions of students, outgoing students.
Okay.
There's a marked decrease in BOCES tuitions, slight increase in the private school tuitions.
Got it, thanks.
What constitutes supervision regular school with an increase of 220,000? Code 2020?
On the 2-page?
Yes,
Yep.
it's on the 2-page.
It's administrators, too.
2020.
Yeah, and overall, that's our administrators' budget codes, principals and everything, salaries. We had just settled their contract last year, so we had to move some monies around. We didn't have everything in those budget lines last year. So now when we put it all back, that's what the increase is.
Okay. And then,
It's really almost a 2-year increase.
and then also, what is instruction regular school and instruction special education?
Instructional regular school is all of our regular instruction, all the classroom teachers, all the instruction in the regular school. Instruction special schools is our special education, instructional special education is our special education services, teachers, psychologists, social workers, and so forth, in those codes. The instruction special schools, 2330, is for summer schools and our community education program.
It's helpful if we read the number so everybody can follow along easier, okay?
Noreen, I hate to ask you to talk, so maybe I'll ask Dr. Pelletieri. Do you want to explain, just for the listening public, what occupational education is? Or maybe one of the principals can
Yeah.
just jump in case there's a question of what that is and how we use it? It's...
Occupational education.
Yeah, 2280.
Occupational education is for programs that are at BOCES that we send our students to. There are a number of different programs that are run that we don't have enough students here in the school district to run, to have them done here. There are things like cosmetology, auto mechanics, aviation, nursing services, animal care, different programs like that where we might have 1 or 2 students involved in them each year. Sometimes, I believe they're 1 year, sometimes 2-year programs.
I was going to say, Mr. Murphy can jump in on this one, too.
Yeah.
That's correct. My preference, students usually in 11th and 12th grade participate in either one or both. It's also part of the CDOS credential. For some students, it's part of their future career plans and the new regulations for the high school diploma.
Could the board get a list of, what programs are taking advantage of it by how many students?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. We typically wait till the end, we'll go through, is that?
It's just relevant to this topic.
All right, jump up. Here's your name and address, please.
Sure. Brian McNamara, 450 Laurel Road. My son is a kindergarten student in Covert. Related to the OT increase, is the increase related to rates or a volume assumption year to year?
For the occupational education, it's really due to the volume and the number of students that we have going there. We've seen a slight uptick over the last few years, a few additional students going there. Depending on the program, the cost could be, I think some of the smaller programs are $8,000 or $9,000 each, and they could go up to an intensive service program, which could cost $25,000, $26,000.
And in terms of what BOCES is charging, is that pretty constant year over year?
That has been pretty standard. We have usually, sometimes we see 3 to 5% increases in those areas. The different part of our BOCES programs, depending on what the services are, will change from year to year. But I believe the occupational education rates are 3 to 5% increases.
Thanks.
$2,850. I'm just looking at almost 10% increase. Co-curricular?
That's really due to the services that we provide, our teachers provide after school. And we had renegotiated our contract with the teachers a couple of years ago, and this is really one of the impacts of that negotiation. So.
Is this academic or?
No, this is
Supervisory after school?
After school.
Sporting events or
Yes.
or other events, okay.
We just moved back up to 2620, educational television. I know a couple of years ago, we sort of set out a plan to reset the middle school TV studio. Can we just talk about where we are in that plan? And we also added things for the high school last year, I think. Or was
Yes,
that just in the bond?
No, that was.
Right. Did we do both?
No, I don't think it was the bond.
It wasn't
But
the bond?
We made some additions over the summer, some changes in the high school program. And we have some, I think, changes that they have planned for next year. I don't know who the best person to...
We've asked Jason Starr to join us tonight. Why don't we start with the middle school? Jason, I don't know if you can talk to it or you want Sheila?
It's a wonderful school.
We like it too.
Yeah, we had the new, the cameras installed that we have that are wonderful, and we also now have teleprompters, so the students are reading straight off. But to be honest, I don't know if those cameras, Brian, maybe you know, are on the lease for, he has that stuff in his head.
See, we get everybody involved here. This is a big.
It is, the cameras, I think we spend $30,000 a year in a code. It's in one of the lease purchase codes. I'm not sure what year of how many we're in, 3 of 5 or 3 of 4, whatever, but yeah, we have that. And out of that code, we also, sometimes get additional things, cables or DVD burners. They ask for things, related to the studio. So the studio is in a much better place,
So
certainly.
I was going to say, we're in a good place at
Oh,
the
yes.
middle school studio.
Oh, yes.
The studio is also used for the Exploratory 7 class, and they do lots of the cameras, using the iPads, making movies, it's much, with the cameras,
And,
much more involved.
And we also have a much greater involvement of middle school students. For example, last night was the first of the all-district concerts, and the video crew was, I think, 5 middle school kids and 2 high school kids. So that tide has changed. You remember, it was all high school
was all
kids,
high
and
school,
the
right.
middle school kids would barely participate. The middle school kids are much greater percentage now of the kids who do the events that happen at the middle. So all of those things that came with the new equipment, that's all evolved as we planned.
We've made the studio more user-friendly for our students.
More user-friendly for the students, right. And it's, they don't have to, cart the things. Remember, they used to have to cart the huge.
Right. I was going to say, Jason, it's time for you to jump in.
Massively user-friendly, because now all the cameras can be hooked up with a single cable when we take it into the auditorium. We used to have anywhere from 3 to 6 people all wound up in knots every time we did a production there. So now it's fiber, like we have in the high school. And the cameras, while a different model, they're smaller, which is more age appropriate. The insides are the same as what we have in the high school. Same kind of HD quality. So there's been a massive upgrade in terms of bringing the middle school studio into a really nicely functioning, state-of-the-art studio for a middle school that can now film in the auditorium. And Bob has been spending time getting it functional in the gymnasium as well.
It works in the gymnasium. They for the robotics tournament 2 weeks ago, they had one corner set off, and they had a camera set up there, and they were doing interviews of people. Like there was 2 middle school students who were being like the news anchors for the robotics tournament, and going around speaking to people, as well as Mr. Sleva had a camera up in the balcony filming them. And that's because Mr. Kroger and our middle school people and custodians ran the wires. I have no idea what they did. I just said, yes, you can do that.
We love hearing that. I have no idea what they did.
I have no idea. No, I know what the outcome was going to be, but they ran the wires so that we do have the capability of filming in the gym, whether it be from the balcony or from the floor. So it's really cool.
Fabulous. So now the students, the middle school students, when they come to the high school, are they better prepared to use the high school AV equipment, or is it totally different once they get to the high school?
You might, I don't know if you see it yet. You might need one more year.
Oh, okay.
You might need
This year?
All right.
Okay.
Although
I'll ask you next year.
Yeah, although I am seeing, like in the video club, which is usually attended, there are a lot of young students, so it's still new coming from the middle school, but the interest seems to be there. And, so it's working according to plan.
That's
what we want.
fabulous. And the high school, do we have upgrades in our budget for the high school?
Yes,
or-
we do. Yeah.
First, maybe you can explain what we did in the control room last summer. We had a whole mess of wires and
Whole mess of wires?
Whole mess of
Love that.
wires.
Whole mess of wires.
which was cleaned up and
Oh, it was a sight to behold. These are wires that have been accumulated since academic year 89-90, when we first installed the TV studio there. You don't want to get me talking on all the detail of this, but basically we replaced the monitor wall with what you now find in virtually every television studio and television truck, which is a video wall. So instead of individual monitors, there are 4 huge monitors that act actually as one, and they can be divided into segments for not only the studio cameras, but for every video source in the entire facility. And one of the benefits of this is actually troubleshooting. If something isn't working properly, this is heavy-duty technology, we can see at a glance where that signal is stopping. So that may not sound all that glamorous and important to you folks, but it's a massive time saver in terms of downtime, so the students aren't delayed in their classroom activity by virtue of something not working. You get to see where it is and do something about it. This coming school year will be the second and final year of an upgrade of our video signals. Back in the 90s, we had a bond issue, and we purchased what's called Camplex, which is a processing system of video signals, so that all the cameras, when in the studio, in the auditorium, in the gymnasium, and even in the athletic field, can use a single cable for video, power, intercom, and several other functions. Sync, these are technical functions. And that's an analog technology. Now everything is digital. And so the cost of doing this all at once seemed unreasonable to me because we needed to do other things in the budget. So we divided it over 2 years. So we have half of that installed already, and we'll be installing the other half next year. Additionally, we're finally getting a new set for the TV studio. The current set, which many of you have appeared in, when you were 20
And will again this year, right? Here we go.
Literally.
With all the half of books, you're gonna...
The half books, yeah.
You're gonna get rid of the half of books?
Yeah. We're getting rid of the half of books for no books. And we're going to be replacing that with a set that also has a video wall. So whenever you see a news show, be it local TV 1 or News 12 on Long Island, or anywhere from CNN to local news, you'll see a wall of image behind them. And we figured, well, we need to replace the set. Why not go in the direction of how it's being utilized professionally? What this does, and again, stop me if I'm giving you more information than you want, is integrate computer graphics more thoroughly and more intensely into the TV studio. The teacher of both TV production and the morning news show, Lynn, is actually a computer graphics teacher. And she has the expertise and the desire to oversee this kind of integration. So students in TV production class will be creating video animations and graphics that will become part of the sets. Students will also learn how to process those signals so that they can be sent to the appropriate part of the set, the video monitors that are on the set. So that's what that's a multi-year project.
I was going to say, that's not all in this year's budget. It's
Right,
multi-year.
1/5.
Okay. Thank you. Don't leave.
Try.
Please.
We couldn't get an inconspicuous getaway.
They did do it on tiptoe, you noticed that, right?
Waited between segments.
They were trying to sneak out. They got busted. I know.
Have we added any money in the budget for mental health education? I know we talked about how the state wanted us to do more in our curriculum. So have we been able to add anything? Is it in here somewhere, or
We haven't really added anything specific to that. What they're asking us to do is integrate new curriculum into the existing health, as well as developing social emotional learning programs and protocols, both of which we really got a little ahead of the curve on. So the SEL curriculum we started on last summer, and we'll build on it as we go.
So I could speak to that a little bit also in terms of the professional development we're doing around SEL, social emotional learning, and we have allocated funds for curriculum development. There's actually some, I'll just jump in for a second. There's money for science programs as there are new science, next generation science standards, New York State science standards, there's ELA and math standards as well that are changing. We're going to be doing a presentation on that soon. I hope if I can get on the agenda for that. And we've been chock full lately. And we have a mindfulness initiative in the district we're very proud of. We're working this year with our teachers and staff around mindfulness and imparting that knowledge on our teachers. And next year we will have a small summer program for a handful of teachers as well. And then next year we're looking to do this, training our teachers on implementing mindfulness in the classrooms with our students. Something we feel is very timely and important for our students. Again, mental health, as you spoke of.
Just, I guess the point I was trying to make was that we started adding this investment before the mandate.
And you, the mental health, you do that in health. Do you do that at the high school, the middle school level? Do you touch it all? Well, that's a question, actually. You do it both at the high school and the middle school level? I see, yes.
It is at the high school, middle school level. It'll also be part of what we do when we write curriculum this summer. We're going to work with Carol Rosetto and staff around K through 5 as well.
Okay,
That's the new mandate.
We're piloting a curriculum writing project that Dr. Leahy started over the summer with our guidance counselors, social workers, and school psychologists with the ninth graders. That was cumulative. It was a series of different activities. One was bringing in David Flood, who was a presentation speaker on interconnectedness and social well-being relative to social fabric. No one should eat alone. Thank two people today. Things of that nature. Which was followed up with a series of public service announcements on the morning news on mindfulness techniques and mindfulness methodology, which was followed up with a series of public service announcements the week before midterms on stress and coping skills, which is followed up by the curriculum project itself over the next 3 months, which will be push-ins to ninth grade classes, 40-minute lessons taught by our student support staff, social workers, psychologists, and social workers, with a topic each month. The first month is developing positive relationships, with friends, social networking on the internet, as well as the need for communication skills. The second one is stress management and memory loss. Stress both in academic and non-academic settings. And the third is drug and alcohol abstinence, which would be the NP. And we are fully availing more of the TV studio as outlets to get those mindfulness memories. In other words, this guest speaker wasn't a standalone. We did a series of follow-ups to the TV studio to have that continual recursive learning.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, your overall budget looks like it's up almost 4.91%. Can you give us a brief explanation?
A brief explanation, all our subject areas are flat or down: business, English, foreign language, greenhouse, the library, the main office, and math. The increase is largely attributable to 2 line items, one in the IB diploma budget and one in the science. The IB diploma increase is due to the ways in which extended essay coordinators are compensated. For the 22 years, teachers receive a $100 stipend per month for mentoring a student in their IB Extended essay, which is a 2-year research project. Next year will mark the first time, well, this year will mark the first time that there'll be an increase, and that being paid $75 a year, or $150. That, coupled with the drastic increase in the number of students who are full IB diploma candidates, has resulted in a significant line item relative to the rest of the budget. The second increase is in the science budget, which is about $3,900, and that is the result of 2 field trips. One is as a result of the growth in the IB diploma, there's a growth in the number of students taking IB environmental systems, which has a field trip component where they have to do experiential work. And we use the salt marsh predominantly, so there's an increase in cost there, largely for transportation. The second one is in IB chemistry, and because of our new snazzy top-of-the-line science equipment, there's an increase desire for more sophisticated experiential learning outside. So the IB chemistry is involving a field trip going to Stony Brook Lab, involving equipment that we can't afford. Some of the electron microscopes are in the realm of $750,000, and the experience there will increase the amount that they can use our equipment here. So it is an increase in experiential learning.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about technology at our next meeting, is that correct? Right?
Yeah,
Somebody said-
if we could, there are still pieces that need to be finalized in
still
terms of
working
some
on?
specifics. So next meeting, we'll be prepared to talk about that.
Okay. Robert, transportation, as you
just gonna say
pointed
the same
out. What?
I was just going to say the same thing.
You wanted, as you pointed out, we had some issues
Yes.
with transportation this year. What do we look like for next year?
We should be in good shape for next year. You know, I believe all the transportation has been running fairly well, knock wood. We don't have any problems now. There were 1 or 2 hiccups when we got back started with Bauman Bus, but everything seems to be rolling very smoothly right now. We're not experiencing any large increases in that contract. That's going to be limited to the increase in the CPI. We'll know what that is in May. It's another one of the state calculations. Unless we decide to do something different with transportation for next year, which we haven't made any
Right, are we...
final decision on that
Are you
yet.
thinking of rebidding?
We hadn't really talked about it yet.
Gotten that far?
It continues on our radar screen,
Right.
and in other words, we haven't left that out as an opportunity for us. I know that there is still a lot of interest on the part of at least one other vendor. One of the reasons why we have in the past shied away from going out to bid a second time was that we had no interest in the past.
Well, it could hurt us, too.
Yes.
Yes.
It could, we're
Well,
taking a risk.
without any
The last
interest in
time we
it,
did
and we
that,
only had a
Right.
single bidder, then
Right.
we could have been in trouble. So we were better staying with the cost of living. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Mr. Bartels had rightfully said that the cost of living, which will be used, is not going to be available to us until June, or late May and early June. And so, I mean, right now, it's over 2%. You know, it's 2.13%. So I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like in June. Hopefully, it will come down a little bit. And there's no ceiling on it. So it is built in. So we may want to consider that possibility. The other thing that we had promised the board we were going to continue to do was to look at performance of the life of the remaining contract for this year and provide you with a report in May, which we intend to do.
Robert and John Scalise, Mr. Scalise, 1621, 200, 10, 9,000. I'm perplexed with that line. It's saying it's a 267% increase, but the numbers 1621-200-10-9000.
John's looking it up. Just for the board's information, as we go through, some of the equipment you might see in the budget lines, the 16, 20, and 21s by building may jump. You know, you may see a huge increase one year, you may see a huge decrease the next year. That's because of sometimes we're buying pieces of equipment for one building or another building. One year, we don't need that the next year, but we're buying it someplace else. So as we go through, just be cognizant of that. That's one of the reasons that those numbers jump around.
Is that for a single purchase there, John, or is it for multiple? Or?
No, that's actually for multiple purposes. The 1621-200-10-9000. This past year, we purchased a brand-new tractor for the district. These are attachments for that tractor that I would like to see in the budget. One is a rotary sweeper so that we could sweep our own parking lots. The second is a two-stage snow blower that'll fit on the tractor for heavy snow. And the third is an aerator. It's a soil conditioner. It actually aerates and seeds at the same time. So we can hopefully maintain the fields within the district. And that's for the new tractor.
Who sweeps our parking lots now?
The village will,
They come through?
they come through once a year usually, right before homecoming, I believe, into our parking lots. But with that sweeper also, with the light snow, it works out very well. So we'll be able to use that. And if we don't have enough to plow, we'd be able to use the sweeper.
So you don't want me to go through all this. Talking to myself, I'm sorry. Talking to myself, but everybody hears me.
You know, the overall maintenance budget is up by 1.5%. So if you notice, there are a lot of minuses in that very same column. And as John had suggested and Robert suggested also, they wildly fluctuate from year to year. So that, we'll buy something for one building one year and then it'll zero out the following year and we'll go someplace else. Just so you know, by the way, we looked a long time ago at buying a sweeper for the district. Maintenance of our parking lots and with the sand that's on them all the time, it creates a lot of wear and tear. And the more we can, in fact, get to them and clean them up, the better off we are in terms of the long-term maintenance of our blacktop.
Blacktops and buildings.
Pardon me?
The sand goes into the buildings and wears down the floors.
Yes, it does. And so this really is a relatively inexpensive alternative for, in fact, hopefully achieving that same goal.
Just again, I'm not going to ask Doreen about this. I'm going to ask you, Robert. Maybe you want to just explain the summer school. It looks like the expense is going up, but
On the revenue.
it actually, there's a revenue that offsets it.
Absolutely.
I know there's not, but for the listening audience, can you explain that?
Yeah, we run our summer school program through BOCES. As we have our expenses, all the staff and everything are paid through BOCES. We get a reimbursement in the form of state aid for that. So that produces a revenue to help offset that program. But as our summer school program increases, we have additional expenses in the number of people we have running the program. So that's one of the reasons we have an expense, but that's also a good thing because we have additional revenues coming in from the students as well as that increased state aid.
So it's offset, so it
Yes.
looks like it's growing. It
Looks like it's
it's
growing.
more expensive, but we're not, right, we're not.
Correct.
It's not. It's a good thing.
Yes.
And I'm going to just flip the page. Robert, you spoke about ERS, and we're pulling $500,000 from our reserves.
Yeah.
We did that, we pulled $400,000 last year.
Yes.
You see where I'm going?
Yes.
When are we going to run out of reserves?
But, well, if we don't replenish any in 4 to 5 years at that rate, we have about, after using this, we'll have about 1.5 million left in there. We were up a little over 2 million in that reserve, but we've been using it and trying to replace it, some of what we
Right. Some of
use
what,
each
right,
year,
some of
we
the
try
fund
to-
balance, if we have more in fund balance, we'll
Exactly.
stick it back in there, so,
Exactly.
okay. Because at a certain point, it affects our budget.
I'm trying to use it in a way that we don't get stuck in that,
Okay.
all of a sudden get a spike there.
Do we want to talk about capital projects today, or do we want to talk about capital projects at our next meeting?
Look,
I can go through a more complete list at the next meeting.
Okay.
Why don't I just have a list available instead of trying to go through one by one?
But while we're on that subject, I think it's important, just if you recall at the last Board of Education meeting, there were some things that we did talk about that we intend to do. In terms of capital projects, one of them is during the Easter vacation. We're going to start work on the Hewitt anteroom.
Okay.
And we'll hope to get that complete during that week. And therefore, it will be a usable facility as of the return to school. I guess it's, April 9th or April 10th. The other thing is we're now working with our architects to get back information that will help us put forward a plan for each of our buildings on creating an anteroom at the entrance to each of our buildings so that we can create a vestibule type of effect at each of them. We also intend to get that done. So that's, again, we are now working, architects know this, they're putting together plans for us. We hope to get them ready for approval by the board and discussion with the board, I'm hoping by the next meeting, so that we can move very quickly on this and go out to bid as early as possible so we can get the work done this summer.
Since you brought it up, you talked about, last meeting, we talked about hiring security guards, since you brought up, last meeting. Do you want
Yeah,
to read this one?
what we're doing right now is that we actually put an ad out, and we got back a surprisingly larger number than we had anticipated. We handed them off to the elementary principals, and they are going to be acting as a single unit. And in fact, I don't remember when, are you scheduled this week?
Next Monday, the 20th.
Next, yeah.
Monday, the 26th. Mrs. Waldman has invited us over to Watson, and as a group, we are interviewing, I think, 15 to 20, would you say? Maybe even more. We have so many that we're going to spend 15 minutes with each candidate, hoping that we can all find someone that is appropriate for our building and what we're looking for.
What we're hoping to do is to have, at the next Board of Education meeting, a list of candidates on the Personnel Actions Report, so we can get them hired and get them started as soon as possible.
We're going to interview at least 12 out of about 19 candidates.
Okay. Long day? Okay. Okay.
Really want to go.
Can I ask my questions?
Yes.
We're having some.
You?
No, I'll follow up
I mean, the rest is
next time.
staffing.
Okay. I think we are, as a board, set with, what you presented to us. We'll open up the mic to anybody in the audience who would like to come to the mic and ask questions about anything but staffing and technology.
Thanks.
Capital.
And capital.
Good.
Yes.
Brian McNamara again. About the health services line. So the projection is a 6% increase. And from a trajectory point of view, that's a 30% increase from last year. And I'm curious if there's a narrative that's there.
We have a line?
I get just the item number.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, 2815.
Yeah,
That's on the two sheet.
Health services.
See if it's all staff.
Oh, that's the,
Could you have it 2815 what?
No, that's just 2815. He's talking about the overall.
Oh, the overall. Oh, okay, the two-pager. Yeah, okay.
Just want to see if it's just all staff.
We have a
No, we'll have, there's an answer.
No, well, the answer is
2815.
2815.
it's a staffing increase. There really
Yeah,
aren't any, when you get into the detail lines, most of it is the is staff. I think we had an additional nurse, one more nurse.
Did add
That's
a
really
nurse. We added a nurse.
We added a nurse.
Added a nurse. In addition, the budget in the nurse's office falls under that as well, and that fluctuates depending on the equipment that's needed. Sorry.
We don't mean to laugh.
Needed each year.
Sound like my phone.
That's the equipment under the contract services line, that's sort of going to be most of the variance.
Most of the variance is accounted for by the additional staff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the contracted nurses, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're correct.
Contracted nurse.
Right, the contracted nurses take care of students that have extreme or severe medical disabilities that require private nursing. We have a couple students in the district who go to school here, but they go to school outside the district. They require private nurses. And we contract with students that require, with nurses to do that, to provide that service. And that has gone up in recent years because of the need.
It's contracted nurse service. So, for example, we have a student that needs a nurse to go with them on a bus. So we contract for that service for that short term. There may be a student in another school that we have to provide a nurse for at that school because of those needs. Those are those contracted nursing services.
Right. And the other big piece of that code is to pay for health services for students that attend private school that live in Rockville Center. So we will pay other districts to provide nurses to Uniondale.
I'll explain.
He'll explain.
Yeah, if we have, for example, if students go to Kellenberg, we provide for the nurse. We have students that go to Kellenberg. We have to provide for the nursing services at Kellenberg, our portion for the number of students that we have that go there. Same thing with, we pay Mineola for students who go to Chaminade, and for any other private school. And in the reverse, on the other side, we're paid health services from other districts for students that go to St. Agnes, because we provide the nurse for St. Agnes. So we have other students that come from other districts that go to St. Agnes. They pay us health services. So it's...
Yeah, but that still shows up as an expense within our budget. It's offset by our revenue.
The nurse is
well,
here.
that nurse, even though it's a contracted services over it, it is still, it shows up here as an expense, but there's an offsetting revenue.
So it's baked into the tuition.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm talking directly.
That's my first time.
Glad to have you.
You'll be more
Okay.
prepared with more questions next time, right? All right. We will move on and release our principals.
Thank you.
Always good to
Thank you.
see you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We can do the rest by acclamation. The items for action?
The nomination, we don't need to do anything.
You know what? You want to pull that out, that's fine.
No,
but-
no, that's fine.
Unless you don't
Yeah,
want to,
if-
if you don't want to nominate.
Well,
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
can I get a
Thank you very
motion to
much for coming.
accept items
Okay.
A through F
Voting on a couple of
and the addendum? A through F, yeah.
So moved?
I'm, a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Nope. Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
I did want to make some calendar announcements.
There's,
All right, so can I have a motion to retire into executive session for discussion of specific personnel, contractual, and litigation matters?
So moved.
Second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you to everybody.
Good night.